This is Adam Watson.
And Robert Diaz.
You're listening to the Darkslinger Mafia podcast. You sound a bit under the weather tonight, Robert.
Yeah, a little bit. But I got some of a voice, so...
Yeah, you actually have more of a voice than the first time you did Crypticon with me.
Oh, was I that bad then?
Yeah, we both completely lost our voices by the time we got home from that trip.
That was gnarly.
I think it was also because we had people next to us that were doing glass blowing that was really loud that we were trying to talk over. So it wasn't just the sheer amount of people we talked to that weekend or all the after event stuff we did, like drinking, which is probably not good for your vocal cords.
And the smoking.
Yeah, and the smoking and all that. You know, just kind of mixed into one big mixture of take your voice away type action. So yeah, neither one of us had voices. So
I'll try to power through. Hopefully I don't sound too bad.
Yeah, you sound
on the
fine.
Recording.
You'll sound fine. We've both been sick on the recording before. It's not that big a deal.
It's just auto-tune it.
I don't have auto-tune.
I'm sure there's a Chinese knockoff.
Is it actually a program called auto-tune, or is it like the act is called auto-tune?
You know, I have no idea, but I wouldn't be surprised if people called it auto-tune at first, and then someone marketed it as a package called...
Yeah, I didn't know if it were a thing where it's like, you know,
like,
editing any photo is now called photoshopping, even if you don't do it in Photoshop, you know?
Kind of like styrofoam. Everyone calls it styrofoam.
Or, you know, like...
Kleenex.
All jacuzzis are hot tubs, but not all hot tubs are jacuzzis.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
There's a lot of those.
There are. So anyway, that has nothing to do with tonight's episode. So Moving on. So I have a appearance announcement. Not a convention announcement, but, you know, sort of kind of the same thing.
So it's the kind of thing where you just, like, show up and say, I'm here.
Basically, except for that they know you're coming, so it's not like you just show up randomly and, you know, announce your presence.
Then it's not as exciting.
Yeah, I could see me doing that, though. But anyway, this Saturday, May 5th, is Free Comic Book Day, if you're unaware.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And I will be signing from 3 to 5 at Cosmic Monkey in Portland, Oregon.
Cool.
I've done several Free Comic Book Day signings at Cosmic Monkey in the past, but I don't think I have for probably about 5 years now. Do you remember when Iron Man 3 came out? Because I think that was the last time I did a Free Comic Book Day signing, because I did one and then we went as a group to go see Iron Man 3.
I don't know. That seems like a while ago.
Yeah, it's been quite a while. It's been a good 5 or 6 years. But I was on Facebook the other day, and they posted a thing saying they still had spots left. And what they do is they arrange kind of an O shape of tables in the middle of Cosmic Monkey, and all the creators sit behind them. The first time I did it, they just kind of had tables wherever they could fit them. But then the next time,
they got smart.
Well, I wouldn't say it's like a smart thing, more like just trying to figure out the best way to lay out a whole lot of creators at the same time. But it's kind of like you're almost in a little mini convention. And Free Comic Book Day signings have traditionally been very, very good for me. I've made far more money at some of them than what I have at Comic Cons, and for far less time that you spend there, too.
Do you just bring your own comics that you want to give away?
Well, no, I don't. It's not a giveaway. You're doing a signing just like any other signing.
Oh, so you're not providing the free comic books?
No. The free comics are traditionally the things that have already been put out by like Marvel, DC, Boom, IDW, those kind of companies. In the past, I did take some little mini El Bovine Muerte minis and passed those out for Free Comic Book Day. So if I had something free to give, I would give it. But at the moment, I just don't have any promos that are actual comics.
Are you going to sign things for people that aren't yours?
No. I don't do that.
Why? What if they're just like, I want your signature. Can you sign this for me?
Like on a napkin or something?
No, like on a different comic. They're like, oh man, I've read your stuff before, but I don't have any of it here.
And they don't want to buy one of my issues?
No.
But
they don't have any money.
They bought like something from the guy next to me.
No,
and it's his comic.
Let's say they don't have any money. They got their free comic book and they just want you to sign
it. So they just want me to sign a random Free Comic Book Day issue?
Yeah.
Okay, I would sign it, but I would put at the top, I had nothing to do with this.
No, I just want your signature on it.
Just my signature on it?
Yeah.
That might be kind of weird.
Nah. Maybe the person has this one comic that they were taking around, that they got it on their first Free Comic Book Day, And then everyone that they see out that's signing at a place, they're like, oh, I'm going to get this person's signature in this book.
Well, then, I would do it. I've signed the convention guides that are handed out of the bigger cons. I've signed those before. I signed T-shirts that I had nothing to do with, that were just blank T-shirts, or the T-shirts of the con that you're attending, and somebody's looking to get the signatures on the entire shirt by everybody there. And I've signed body parts, and I didn't have anything to do with those body parts that I signed. So
that sounds a little unfortunate that you didn't have anything to do with them.
Well, it'd be weirder if you're signing someone's body parts that you did have something to do with the creation of.
Oh, no, I didn't mean creation.
Oh, okay.
There was this girl in high school. It was our senior year. She took $1 bill and got, I'm pretty sure, everybody in our class to put a little signature on the front and the back, and she covered the whole thing.
Any reason why?
She just thought it would be fun.
Oh, okay.
To get everyone's signature. Instead of in a yearbook, it was on $1 bill.
When I was in high school, there was a girl who had gone to school with us, the whole time. That, I think it was our sophomore year or junior year, she left. And one of her friends took a roll of toilet paper around and had everybody jot down notes to her on the toilet paper.
Just like everybody gets a square?
You could take as much as you wanted. It was the double ply big roll.
Hopefully no one put
I could never figure out. No one did. I could never figure out why they wanted it on toilet paper, but
It's a good gimmick.
Yeah, it was. So anyway, I'll be there from 3 to 5. I love doing signings at Cosmic Monkey. So
it's a nice place.
It is. It's a great place.
I like it. It's a lot bigger than you think.
Mm-hmm.
With that whole little back room right there.
It's huge. It's easily 3 times the size of their last location. So
I didn't see that.
I had only been in there once. They were actually the first comic shop to carry something that I had published. They carried Ghost Assassin Prelude, and they were the first shop I had stopped at because I heard they were independent friendly. And so I'm like, I might as well just start with the people that I've actually heard that about, right? So I stopped by there, and it was a little bit past the town center, that kind of general location. In Clackamas, yeah. And it was a normal size shop, more along the size of Things from the World, something like that. And all this stuff was just cram-packed in there. So when they got the second location, and it was all of a sudden the big, huge open space, it's now I can actually see all your stuff. This is awesome. So
they're not crowded together trying to flip through a bin.
No, exactly. And they had room to put up all their posters and all the monkey drawings that people have done for them throughout the years.
Well, it's a good location.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember exactly where it is, but the building
It's on Sandy Boulevard.
It's a long road.
I want to say 44th and Sandy, but I could be wrong about that. I know I pull in on 42nd to go there.
So probably.
Probably.
There.
Right, somewhere in there.
Somewhere in the 40s in Sandy.
Somewhere in the 40s on Sandy Boulevard.
How'd WenCon go? I didn't get to hear about that. These fine folks did.
Yeah, they heard about it, but this recording's probably more enjoyable to listen to because we're not doing it in the car. So, WenCon went pretty well.
First question, in the black.
No.
Okay.
No. So, the thing is, last year was the year that I really, really got back to doing conventions. But we did all Diller shows. So sometimes you forget how hard it can be when you're doing a con is just a publisher or writer or something like that,
Those can be a bit more difficult.
We made a decent amount of the cost back. And I would have made more of it back, but I couldn't get my Square Reader to work. I have a new phone now, so hopefully between my 2 phones, I'll be able to figure out how to get that to work finally, or just get PayPal here or Go or whatever it's called, so that won't be an issue any longer. I thought it went pretty well. The panel was interesting. There was an atmosphere of it that was a lot like being at one of the bigger shows, like Rose City or Emerald City or something like that, but in a much smaller venue. And one of the most interesting things about it was that it was on an ice skating rink. So apparently this convention center that it was at is normally a hockey stadium, right?
That's badass.
Yeah, it was. So when we walk
Junior
in...
hockey?
No, it's actually one of the Canadian leagues hockey teams. So
around there.
Well, you're pretty close to Canada when you're there. Yeah, I don't know what their names are. I couldn't remember. When we walked in, it's a good-sized stadium. And I saw hockey banners up top. And then the guy went to lead us to our table. And as we got closer to it, we started walking on what looked like tables that were all put together down below. They were the boards that they lay down so that you can walk on the ice, right?
Yeah.
Really and truly, you couldn't tell you were on ice for most of the day up until you went to pick inventory up off the floor and notice how cold it was.
Yeah, they don't get rid of the ice.
Mm-mm. So that was the biggest giveaway you were on ice. Besides that, it wasn't too bad. And you know how conventions usually get so goddamn hot? Even in the nicest buildings, they still get hot. Well, it stayed a nice even temperature in there.
Yeah, you
no
don't
matter
have
how
that
many people
problem
were
when
packed in,
you're on ice.
right?
I've
But
been to a concert that was like that. They covered the ice, and you stay cool.
right? So it's very much a show that's focused on like cosplay, stuff like that.
Cosplay.
I don't have any problems with cosplay, but a lot of times when you have people who are there doing like costume contests and stuff, they just don't have anywhere to carry their money, you know? So the last show I did at WinCon last year was the toy show, and I ended up making bank off Darkslinger product there, and they told me that, you know, they never saw independent creators. Well, as I learned, the crowd that goes to the toy show is not the same that goes to WinCon. So much like when you're here, you see one crowd at Frankenstein, and maybe you'll see about 10% of the same people going to like Rose City.
Yeah.
Something like that. It works the same way in that area. So, all in all, it was fun. I thought it was a well-organized show. I didn't think that the people who were running it did anything but put on a good show. You know, it was well advertised. When you drove through the town, you saw some banners and advertisements coming into town that, you know, this was going to happen. They got plenty of people through the door. You just never know if you're going to a show that people are going to be able to spend money at or not. So you know that it's a show that people aren't spending money at when they have absolutely nothing that they're carrying around, and they come up and say, I really wish I would have had more money for this.
So good show overall for the show itself.
Yes.
Possibly not a good show for the company.
Possibly not. It's tough to say. I mean, like, you know, when you drive 14 hours somewhere, you're probably not going to be in the black by the time you come back.
Yeah, it's a big stretch.
It's a big stretch. I did come close to making the table money back. I'm more likely to go to shows if all I've lost out on is gas money when I've driven that far than I am if I lose out on all the table money. That being said, I would consider doing it next year. It was fun. There were some things I think that could be done better in terms of the type of guests they get and things like that, pulling people through the door. But the costs of it were pretty minimal, all in all. For a show that was the type it was really cheap to do. It was only $100 for the booth. But I think I would figure out ways to market myself a little bit better in that area. Like, I didn't see a lot of people who are into horror stuff and things of that nature. And I did see a lot of that at the toy show. So if I went back to the area, I'm not sure if I'd go back for WinCon or if I would just focus on setting up as a publisher at the toy show.
That might be a better bet.
It might be. It might be. There seem to be more people who like the kind of stuff I did there.
I mean, hell, at a toy show, if you wanted to do that, if you can get 2 tables, you run one table as Darkslinger.
And then I have you or Elias run the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's been very much a thought of mine. The toy show is coming up in June, so I'm not sure if they're sold out or not yet. I haven't quite made the decision on if I want to make the trek back up there or not.
It's a long trek.
It is, but we left in the middle of the night this time, and we actually got there in about 5 hours.
That's not bad.
No, it's not. I think part of the reason it took us so long last time is because the time we left, we ran into a lot of traffic. This time it was like a good 80% of the driving we didn't see a single other car. So,
oh, that's fantastic.
Did see a few odd things though.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, so number one, I haven't been to Yakima for a long time, right? When we stopped in this town, we didn't even pay attention to what town we were stopping in. You know, when you're on the road, you barely pay attention to the towns you're stopping in.
You don't really care, you just want to get where you're going.
Exactly. So we stop in this town, it ends up being Yakima. And we're driving through, and we notice that every single one of the traffic lights is sideways.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I never seen that before. All the towns I'd ever been in, I'd never seen a town. I've seen a random traffic light here and there that was put up sideways, but never a whole town where every single one
Yeah, so
was,
your red, green, blue is the cross.
Yes.
Yeah.
Instead of vertical, it was horizontal. So we stopped by the McDonald's, and I asked the lady that was the cashier if all the traffic lights everywhere were, if it was just on MLK Boulevard where we're at. And she was really confused by it. She's like, oh, no, they're all like that. Why? You don't live in Yakima? Well, obviously, no. But she didn't say Yakima. She said here. And I said, well, what town are we in? I'm just curious. Which town is this? And she got super confused by it. And she's like, you're at McDonald's. Like,
McDonald's is the town?
No. Like, what is the name of the city or town we're in? Where are we at right now? You're in Washington. Okay. Well, what part of Washington? What's the town's name? And then she finally got it. She's like, oh, this is called Yakima. I was like, okay.
Jesus. It's right. Like you're from some other country.
Right. But as we're driving along around this super, super long stretch of straight but up and down, really hilly roads, it was interesting because we ran into snow for about 5 seconds. So, we leave here...
Like snow on the ground or snow flurry?
Snow flurry. We leave here, we left like right as it was getting dark and it had been bright and sunny and hot all day, right? As we're driving, we go through rain, we go through heat, then we end up going through snow, then back to rain, then by the time the sun was rising in Wenatchee, it was hot. So, as we're going through the snow area though, there's this house that's sitting off the road on the right-hand side. And it looked like... the houses you see that are sitting on quite a bit of acreage, the person has just collected a whole lot of junk.
Yeah.
So it's a ton of junk, and this is like, I'm going to say 3 to 4 in the morning, right? You can see like an old rusty boat, old rusty cars, all this kind of stuff out there, which I always look over there because I want to see, what they have. Even if I don't want to stop, I still just want to see, right? And I see this big, gigantic dude standing out in his yard right by the roadway, just looking perfectly forward. And bear in mind, we're the only car I've seen for like an hour at this point, wearing this bright white dress.
What the fuck?
Right? It's like the whole property looks just like hillbilly as fuck, which doesn't make me uncomfortable because that's how most of the properties around here look.
Did you stop?
Hell no. He's just like staring straight ahead in it. Just like this bright, flowy white dress. And it was clearly just this massive guy.
You should have honked at him.
I didn't want to, because he probably knew that area a lot better than I did.
He might make you squeal like a pig.
He might have. He might have called up his friends who lived a couple miles up ahead and had him pull up and, block traffic or something. So, whatever the case, I wasn't going to risk it. Right? But I'm the only one who saw it. Levon and Elias both missed it.
Oh, you took him with you?
Yes, both of them went with me.
How'd Levon do?
He did great. He did really good. And actually, we are talking right now about working on a comic together that's one of his creations, but that I'm fleshing out the world for. And we're actually going to start by doing another El Bovine Morte commercial.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm going to have him illustrate this. And he sent me some designs of Lame Mime, and he seems like he gets the character and what he needs to draw. But it should be fun. It's a lot different than anything I've ever done before. But at the same time, it's sort of the same humor that is used in El Bovine Morte. So it felt like a natural match to me to introduce this character through EBM.
Alright. That's interesting.
Yeah, it should be. It should be. I'll tell you more about it when we're off air. I can't release too much quite yet.
Understandable.
We still need to cross a few T's and dot a few I's. So
was white dress fat dude the last weird thing you
He
saw?
wasn't fat. That's the thing. This dude was massive, but he was not fat. Imagine George completely yoked.
That's terrifying.
Right? And just for our listeners, if you're confused, George is a friend of ours that's like 6'7". So
Is that the last weird thing you saw?
Yeah. We didn't really see too much. It was just kind of like this weird traffic lights and this random guy just standing outside in this white flowy dress that was this massive, massive beast of a man in the middle of a junkyard. So
What's your next con on schedule?
I only have 2 scheduled past the signing this weekend, and that's Rustorama and the library show. I'm hoping to put Sasquatch and Frankenstein and a bunch of those confirmed for this week, but I'm also trying very hard to get everything all finished with the fulfillment for my Kickstarter.
These shows that you already have, those are summer shows.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, July and September.
All right, so currently nothing on the books besides the signing.
Besides the signing currently.
Until summer.
Yeah, but if as long as Donna still has a table for Sasquatch, that's May 20th. So, and hopefully I'll be able to sit down and fill out all the paperwork and send in a payment this week for that.
Hopefully
But I just want to make sure that everything with the Kickstarter is where it needs to be. I don't want to find out that, there was going to be a small surprise amount because shipping to this one country cost more than you thought it was going to, and, and now I gotta wait because I decided to buy a con table instead. I don't want to do that. I want to get everything all fulfilled.
Yeah, it's good business.
Yeah.
Well, segue.
Okay.
Naturally right into that.
Okay.
Kickstarter. What were you going to talk about? Some sort of shitty Kickstarter thing, right?
Hold on. Before we get into that, while we're on the topic of mine. So I did get the Ghost Assassin Raw editions in. Did you see that?
I saw the email.
So on the way to WinCon, we stopped by my printer that does my small runs and picked up the copies of Ghost Assassin Raw 1, 2, and 3. And in addition, got reprints of Chronicles of Von Helsing number 2 and 3 because we were out of number 3 and dangerously close to out of number 2 after library show. And I went ahead and put El Bovine Muerte number 1.5 into print.
Nice.
So there's now a print edition of that as well. And as I speculated, I don't know if I ever speculated on podcast, but I know I did to you guys off air. I always thought that when I started producing more physical copies of that, it would be an easier sell. WinCon proved that point.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so it's always a thing with independent comics where people are kind of afraid to take a jump on one thing because if they really like it, it may not ever come out with a second issue. But if you show that you can produce the second, third, fourth, it's the reason Chronicles of Von Helsing is so easy to sell off my table. Because there's a bunch of issues they can purchase all together all at once,
Yeah.
So, I haven't put EBM number 1.5 on the website yet. I need to do that this week. I just have not had time. I've been so damn busy with everything else. So, on to the Kickstarter news. So, I got this isn't really news, this is more of a complaint. I got an incentive today in the mail from something I backed. Describe the packaging of this package, would you? This is exactly how I got it.
Well, it's just your normal yellow bag, like little package bag with the bubbles on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a whole lot of protection for your book, and
it's no protection.
It can be banged around pretty easy.
Yeah, and look at this one, like the corners and stuff.
This one has no plastic on. Did you open this one, or did it come in nothing?
It came in nothing. This is exactly how I got it. All I did was just open it and just pulled them out.
Your corners are dented.
Right? Doesn't that look more like something that you got at Goodwill than something you helped somebody to
no,
produce?
This looks like something you got at Barnes & Noble.
Good point. So, I don't want to call out the person who did this Kickstarter. But Jesus Christ, how can you think that that's a proper way to package something that people gave you money for,
At least they put this one in a half-assed bag that's torn.
Yeah, they put 2 issues in the same bag. And that's why it's torn.
This is more than one?
I believe so. If you look at it, isn't it? Maybe it's... No, it is. There's a comic on back of the trade paperback.
I didn't flip it over.
So, yeah, there are 2 issues there.
Well, this one's a little bent in your corners.
Oh, yeah, look at the backing board. The corners totally...
the backing board's all fucked up.
Yeah, nice little dent right there. I mean, I do comic grading as a part of my other job, and I can say these comics would not grade higher than fine.
The artwork inside this one isn't too bad, though.
No, the artwork's pretty good, but considering the fact that you've paid this person to help them produce everything, this being the level of quality of how they ship it doesn't make me want to back anything else they do. You know what I mean?
I never really paid attention to it. Maybe this is just poor printing, but does it always just look like they glued books together like that?
Yes.
Oh.
It is more apparent in this type of printing because this is print-on-demand printing. And so the glue strip used is usually not quite as high quality as what you might get from like one of the bigger printing presses.
Oh, maybe that's why. I didn't never notice.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. I mean, what's inside doesn't look bad.
Right.
It's how everything was packaged and
Yes,
the outside.
the presentation of when you get it.
Yeah, your shit shouldn't be that fucked up. Do you want this bag back in there?
No. When I only kept it like this long because I was going to show you. So when I'm sending out all of my Kickstarter incentives, I think I'm going to have one of you guys videotape me packaging them so I can put it on the YouTube channel and just show people how to properly package their Kickstarters. I know how to do it because, I ship out hundreds of comics a month and I don't get returns because they've been damaged while shipping. Like, ever. Comics in general, yes.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I can't even believe somebody would just stick it in there. This is worse than the guy who bag boarded an issue and then put half a piece of bubble wrap on it.
Yeah, when I get my books, they're in that cardboard, which protects it quite nicely.
Yeah.
And there might be some bubble wrap in there too. I don't remember.
Well, you've seen me package. You know I package everything. So
yeah, wrap it in bubble wrap like 12 times.
Put it in, well, not 12 times, but put it in 2 sturdy pieces of cardboard.
Yeah.
I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about submissions and our submissions policy. So during the years that I was a little bit more inactive, I was only getting a few submissions a month. Wasn't that big a deal to keep up on or anything like that. In previous years, I had an editor, whereas now I'm the one handling all the submissions. Now that I'm more active, I'd say I'm getting more like 4 to 5 submissions a week again, and that number will go up as I'm more and more active, right?
Quick question.
Okay.
How many submissions do you think a company like Marvel or DC gets?
Well,
because it's got to be pretty crazy.
I actually put my submission guidelines on the website where Marvel and DC have a part that says do not submit to us.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that because they probably already had this problem.
They probably don't have it in the same way. I'm actively looking to cultivate talent that I can find through whatever means necessary, which submissions is one of, right?
Yeah, so I guess being that big, they wouldn't have to do it that way.
Yeah, Marvel and DC pretty much exclusively at this point recruit from independent companies.
Yeah.
Which, okay, I don't know if DC does it quite to the degree that Marvel does, but Marvel has stated several times, if you want to be a Marvel creator, you create something that gets known in the independent scene, and that's your gateway into becoming a Marvel creator, right?
They're big enough
they can. The problem is when you only hire people who create independent comics, you get an independent comics mentality into the mainstream market, which is not a good way to run your mainstream books all the time. So there are guys who have been primarily known as independent creators who went on to create fantastic works of mainstream comic characters. Like, Jeff Smith will always primarily be known for creating Bone, right? He did one mainstream product, which I would argue that all his books are mainstream at this point, but he created one thing for DC Comics after Bone was done, and that was a 4-part Shazam story that he went back to the roots of the character from like the 40s, where he's this goofy kid who got the power of Shazam and he spoke the word and became Captain Marvel, who's this do-gooder kind of goofy guy, right? Mm-hmm. It was really, really, really good. It was arguably not in continuity with the rest of Shazam, though, because he took it back to lighthearted, and kind of reworked the origin in ways. And then I think after that, they pretty much just continued on their grim and gritty path with the character afterwards, right? But I don't know that for a fact because I didn't read anything past that point. But in any case, you can get some of the best stuff when you've recruited talent from, wherever it's available, obviously including the independent comics medium. But when you've hired somebody who's primarily been known for like creating eating disorder comics on Tumblr, and I'm just throwing that out as just an example, and then you hire them to write Spider-Man, it's probably not going to be that thrilling of a comic, right? You look at the 80s with Jim Shooter, and he wanted all the top comic talent. you know, the top talent from DC, the top talent from here, the top talent from there. And so he did a lot to encourage finding that kind of talent, making that talent want to work in Marvel Comics. So he started up the Epic line during that time, which was Marvel's creator-owned imprint. And it did a lot of very adult material. What you think of like Vertigo doing, because you're familiar with Vertigo, Epic actually did first. With the exception that Vertigo was primarily the British invasion at first. And Epic was just kind of, you know, every creator.
Always a British invasion.
Right. But during the time Jim Shooter worked at Marvel, they had Harlan Ellison working for them on some books. And you may not know Harlan Ellison, but he is regarded as one of the best sci-fi writers of all time. Whether he deserves that or not, he is considered one of those. Stephen King did like 8 pages of an X-Men story back in the 80s. It was a charity book, but still, you know, Stephen King did it.
Yeah.
And it actually didn't read like a charity book, amazingly enough. Because, you know, that's one of the things, like you have one of the freebie promos or a charity book or something like that. They're usually garbage tier, right? You can actually say what came out under him was not. The people who are looking for the talent these days, I've always had this kind of thought that Marvel didn't really care about its sales as much as it cared about the attention paid to it. It wanted the accolades and the awards and things like that. Even if that doesn't mean the money, right? So instead of trying to create people who would create good X-Men stories, they seem to have found people that won awards for creating something they did and said, hey, now you work on the X-Men, right?
Maybe to them that translated to sales.
Maybe, but I don't know how they could think that when their books went from like 200,000 copies down to 100,000 copies down to 80,000 copies and now we're around 30,000 copies, you know?
Yeah, but did that decrease start when they brought in these award-winning people?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, they didn't know that at the time. They would have, I would assume they would have thought.
I mean, they were on a downward spiral before that. But
well, I still think that if you bring in award winners, you're most likely doing it because you think they're going to bring in their crowd with them.
Right, I would just take a look at what they won awards for.
Yeah.
You know?
That's what I would do.
Metalocalypse is one of my favorite cartoons of all time. Could Brennan Small and John Schnepp and those guys write a fantastic Captain America story? Maybe. I'd love to read what the pitch was. They might be able to.
I wouldn't.
But I would not assume that they're going to write a fantastic Captain America story based off of Metalocalypse.
Yeah, but if you're in a downward spiral.
Yeah, but my point is more that I think a lot of the bigger publishers would actually do better if they opened their submissions policies up again. And maybe created a new couple of anthology books that were just there to cultivate new talent. Because that's one of the things they used to do is like Marvel Comics Presents and things of that nature. Marvel Fanfare. They had a bunch of anthology books. Were primarily there, it seemed at least, to put the new guys on until they were ready to start working on something like the Avengers or the X-Men or Spider-Man, something of that nature. And if they had that, then there would be more training for these guys prior to jumping onto a big book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think that also comes down to there's a big problem in the comic industry where there's no mentorship.
It would be, yeah, that's probably a big problem. It'd be interesting if one of these big companies said, like, this one day a year, we'll take submissions. And then everybody works on their shit for a year.
Right.
And then you get flooded with, like, I don't know, 100,000, 200,000.
Right.
A million different
The problem
submissions.
is you would have to have editors to read all of those submissions.
Yeah.
Or to look at the artwork for all those submissions, or, you know, whatever sort of submissions they are. So I can see why they don't do it. I just think that there need to be a lot more voices in comics than what there are, especially in the mainstream, where it's like, seems like it's the same 20 people again and again and again and again and again.
Isn't it always?
It didn't used to be that way. In like it did in like the 60s, but in the 70s and 80s there were various people known for various books. You know, like Frank Miller was the Daredevil guy. Chris Claremont was the X-Men guy. And yeah, you would occasionally see like this guy wrote like 12 titles. But for the most part, most of them kind of stuck with their own books or their own little universes or whatever inside, you know?
Well, today it's all about money. nothing else matters.
It doesn't seem that way, though, because it seems like they're doing everything possible to kiss the money away.
They still have a lot of money. They don't really care.
Well, the corporation itself does, but is that division?
Doesn't matter. It'll keep it afloat.
Yeah. And honestly, it doesn't really matter to me. The only reason it matters at all is because they're the part of comics people look at the most.
I don't like big things like that. It just feels better to go and buy a smaller comic. Anyways, back to yours.
Anyway, back to mine, because I care far more about my company than I do theirs.
Yeah.
And newsflash, I don't want to work for them. So even if they open up the submissions again, I want to submit. I didn't get very many submissions in the couple of years that I was inactive. Got a couple a month here and there. But now that I've been a lot more active, submissions have really started picking up again. Submissions are a great thing. I found quite a few of my creators that way. Quite a few of them through just blind submissions. But lately, there have been an influx of people who aren't bothering to look at the submission guidelines.
That sounds annoying.
It is. So, I just want to state a few things about submissions. Number one, all of our submission guidelines are on the website. They're pretty easy to find because they're in a tab that states submissions.
That's pretty smart.
Right? We don't accept submissions through Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, or anything of that nature. So when people message me through Facebook, Twitter, or Tumblr, asking me what I'm looking for in an artist, anything like that, I always refer to them to the submission. If you never take the time to submit to me after I've sent you something like that, I'm never going to know if I want to work with you or not. It's just pretty simplistic. But the other thing is, I've had a lot of writers specifically over the last year actually tell me they don't want to go through the submission guidelines.
That's their problem.
Right? I don't know if it's that they find themselves to be so good that they shouldn't have to submit, or what.
Well, what's the difference here? Is it that they're sending it to you instead of going to this thing that says submissions and filling out a form?
Yes, so if they contact me through the website, there's a contact us form on the website that automatically sends it to the administration account, right? So generally, I get probably 10 to 12 emails a day through the website. But I'd say the vast majority of them are random people with Gmail addresses, probably the same guy sending it over and over again, that's all telling me that they're a SEO genius and that they need to work on my website so I can improve my SEO rankings.
Ooh.
You know what SEO is, right?
No.
Search engine optimization.
Oh.
So, they'll figure out that I haven't taken the time yet to include metadata for tags of how people can find the website and things like that. Because most of the time when I'm building a new page for the website, I don't do that, honestly. It's more of a
sense to me, so.
Time sort of thing than anything else. It does what? Did you say?
It doesn't make any sense to me, so whatever.
It's just like, okay, so say you go onto Google and you search whatever it is that you go onto Google for. So with you, I'm going to say clown porn.
You might not be wrong.
Right. So I'm going to assume that something like Pornhub might pull up, right? Well, it's possible that the video title just says, clown porn, and that's why it popped up. But maybe you show up with a video that's not clown porn at all, right? You're like, why did this show up? This isn't what I wanted.
These aren't clowns.
Right? Well, that's because somewhere in the metadata text, they've put the keywords clown, porn, da-da-da-da, right?
Ooh, that's smart.
Right? So, these people that go on about the search engine optimization, I wouldn't pay for that service. And there are people who can actually make your website far more discoverable than what you ever knew, but I'm not just going to hire some random person who just sends me a message, has a Gmail address. They always have Gmail addresses, every single one of them, right?
Yeah, because it makes you think that that they work for Gmail.
Hey, it doesn't make me think that. And that's the whole thing. You're trying to pitch me on doing something for my website, and you apparently don't even have a dedicated domain of your own. Why would I hire somebody to work on a website that does not have a website?
Fair enough.
Unless I'm looking for a dedicated employee to come into my business every single day and work on it. That doesn't make a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I get a higher percentage of artists submitting to me than anything else. But our submission guidelines clearly state you have to send us something featuring Darkslinger characters unless you have a project you're pitching to us that is a complete story. So meaning art is done, the illustrations are done. If it's going to be colored, I want the coloring to be done. Because I don't want to sign you on for a project and wait 10 years to get it, you know?
So include something that's yours or have something that's ready to be published.
Exactly. So I've had a lot of people who've tried to go around the submission guidelines. So one thing that makes us different than a lot of the other companies is I don't mess around with creator-owned. I will do partially creator-owned, but not fully creator-owned stories. The reason for this is okay, like with Image, the way it works is if somebody signs up to be published by Image, there's a flat fee that's taken out of the publishing, right? They can pull the publishing rights from Image whenever they want, I think, although they might be signed up for a certain time period. It would make sense that they would be signed up for that time period. And if it's popular enough, they keep publishing it, yada, yada, yada. But a lot of the lower tier books that go through Image never even make the benchmark of what the fee is, which I think is like $2,500 or $3,500 or something like that, right? Of course, you got your books like Saga and things like that, blow that away. Yeah. But they have control over certain aspects when they go through Image. Like, if they decide that they want their books to come out in trade paperback, and Image is still working with them, they'll publish a trade paperback of it. Or if they decide they want to do a hardcover collection, right? But to the best of my knowledge, you don't get to decide where that hardcover is produced. So I like being able to control all that myself. But the reason Image can stay afloat doing creator-owned is because the way it's set up is there are two different companies. There's Image Central, and then there's Image Comics, right? Image Central is all the Founders comics. Savage Dragon, McFlarn with all of the Spawn stuff, Top Cow, so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
And now Walking Dead, Robert Kirkman print in there too, right? That's part of Image Central. The whole thing is Image publishes all these other titles so that if their titles aren't making money, there's books coming in that pay this fee that make it so that they can do whatever they want with their titles, right? So Eric Larson has been working on Savage Dragon forever. And if that were a fully independently produced comic, which you can say Image is fully independent all you want, they're not. They're like the third largest or fourth largest, depending on the month, comic company there is. Eric Larson working on Savage Dragon, it's up around like the 200s now, something like that, right? How many people have you met that actually read Savage Dragon?
I can't think of anyone.
When you go to the comic shop, do you ever really see copies of Savage Dragon?
I couldn't tell you what it looks like or what it's about.
It looks like the Hulk with a fin on top of his head.
Oh,
and it might be a fantastic book. I have no idea. I've had plenty of copies of the early issues in my resale bins. I've never taken the time to read one of them. So I don't know. I might be missing out on something that's fantastic. My comments aren't about the quality of whatever the work is with Savage Dragon, but more about the fact that as a full 32-page color comic coming out on a monthly schedule, it sells around, I think, 2,000 copies a month. The trade paperback sales on it are very minimal. It doesn't have a very big fan base, but it doesn't matter because if that title doesn't make money, one of the titles that do make money that come from the Image comic sector, like, Saga, Southern Bastards, I Hate Fairyland, one of those, the money that they're pulling in the fee that they pay Image Central to publish their book, pays for whatever the founders want to do, right? They still make money. So they make sense to do creator-owned for that whole reason, right? There have been very, very few companies outside of Image that have really been able to figure out how to do creator-owned in a way that keeps the company afloat. Dark Horse does creator-owned, but from what I understand, I don't think they do full creator-owned. I think they do own a percentage of something. I do believe Hellboy, Sin City are both creator-owned. But those were also books that, when they came in with, the creators were already very well known in the comic industry.
And you might want to kind of explain to someone that might not know, listening, what you mean by creator-owned coming into the company and how they don't keep afloat and that sort of thing.
Okay, let me try to explain this a bit better. So you know what creator-owned means?
Yeah, well, maybe I have what I think it
Okay,
means.
creator-owned comics generally mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that you own the publishing rights to it, because a lot of times when you have pitched something creator-owned, your rights to publishing are locked up for a certain amount of time, right?
To me, what you're saying is it's someone that comes in and created this thing, and they need someone to publish it, and the publisher
That
wants
is
to own
basically
part of
exactly
that.
what I'm saying. Some publishers own part of it, some do not.
Yeah,
Image is the only one that you do 100% where you still own all of the IP. I think the rights to the printed editions are locked up for a while. I can't remember how long though. Might be like 6 months, might be a year. I don't remember.
and that was the easiest way to explain it to these folks.
Right.
I might not have understood what
Okay.
you're saying.
So it's explained now?
I think so.
Okay. So most companies haven't really figured out a really good way to monetize creator owned. Marvel did the Epic line well before Image existed, but had quit doing it by the time the Image founders worked at Marvel, which probably is what led to the creation of Image to begin with. Because if they had had this really good creator owned platform in place with Epic, chances are those guys would have just went with what was already easily there, right? But instead, Epic had already been pulled. But one of the reasons I've heard Jim Shooter himself state for the creation of Epic was because it made the top tier creators who worked for them happy to be able to do their own things. So if you have these guys who are selling, millions of copies of books for you on Spider-Man and X-Men, it might be good for you to let them do their own things as side projects that you can still make a little bit of money on, and they stay loyal to you as a publisher, right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense to do creator owned in that way if you're a big company. But
It doesn't seem like an idea that works for a smaller company.
no, that's the whole thing. Image started with a lot of money. These
And
guys
it started
already,
with huge names too.
yes, it started with a bunch of guys who had made a shit ton of money off of comics because in the early 90s, when Todd McFarlane was on Spider-Man, Jim Lee was on X-Men, Rob Liefeld was on X-Force, that was one of the highest paid points for comic creators, if not the highest paid point in history. So, not only did they already have plenty of money, or they should have, unless they were really mismanaging it, but on top of that, just like you just stated, all these guys were huge names.
Oh yeah.
Everybody knew Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, and Jim Lee. Even if you didn't know Valentino and Eric Larson and Mark Silvestri, which you probably knew Mark Silvestri because he was also an X-Men artist at one point in time. You knew those three at the very least, right? So, whole thing is, a lot of people who submit to us don't bother to read the submissions guidelines and just make the assumption that we also do 100% creator owned. There are plenty of alternatives to Image if for some reason, maybe Image doesn't want to work with you, maybe you don't want to work with Image. There are alternatives that do creator owned. I do believe Alterna is a creator owned company. But for me, I can't make sense of it because I take a look at this and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do all this marketing for you. I'm going to be pimping your stuff out at cons. It's going to go into all these comic shops. I'm going to be doing all this and I'm going to spend thousands upon thousands of dollars in the printing costs, which I could recoup if it sells X amount of copies according to our contract. But if I'm going to go through all that work, I do want a piece of it.
Yeah, that makes sense business-wise.
Right? The whole thing is, I know there are a lot of creators who aren't comfortable with this. But one quick look at our submission guidelines, you could see it states in big bold letters, we do not do 100% creator-owned properties.
Maybe that's what drives some of these people away, and that's understandable. If they want to do their own thing, they want to do their own thing.
Well, no. That's what I'm stating. I still get submissions on a weekly basis right now from writers specifically that want to do 100% creator-owned, despite the fact that I've already stated in big bold letters that's not something I do.
Do you get them actually stating that, or are they just they're just submitting their own stuff to you?
No, they state that.
Oh, okay.
They state that. So the thing about it that almost kind of, I don't want to say makes me laugh because that's kind of mean, but on top of it staying 100% creator-owned, they also want me to take care of everything with the artist front, the colorist front, and the lettering front. So they would keep 100% of the IP, and I'm paying artists and artists and letterers, colorists, all that.
Oh, they want you to pay for it, not find it. I thought you meant like just be in charge of who's doing it for their comics.
So this is probably the best submission I've got since I've become active again. I will go ahead and talk about this one. So
best as in best worst or best as in best?
Best worst.
Oh, okay.
So I've got some pretty interesting submissions over the years. Some of my top talent has come from submissions or putting a call out to submissions. You know, I mean, like Marco, Joel, Melissa, they all came from submissions. Some of my other creators came to me in other ways, like Tony. You know, we were doing a signing together. We were talking in the car on the way up, and I was like, you know what? You're perfect to do Chronicles of Von Helsing. You want to do it? There was a little bit more to the conversation than that, but not really too much more. So I'll just give you a couple of the best submissions I've got, okay? So years ago when Kate was running the submissions, we got a submission from, it was actually a team of creators. It was the writer, the artist, you know, so on and so forth. They had actually read the submissions policy, so they knew we didn't do 100% creator own, but they had stated in there that was fine for them because getting a paycheck meant more than holding on to 100% of the rights. So they were trying to negotiate an equity share in the property, which is fine. That's perfectly fine.
That's business. And real quick, do you have a standard for that listed?
No, I do not. That is somewhat negotiable, and it also depends on what my relationship is with someone. Okay. I am more likely to do a project that I didn't create with somebody if I have a previous relationship with them, which is why, like, Who Will Save the World exists, is because I had a previous relationship with Stefano. He was the artist of Chronicles of Von Helsing. It's a lot easier if I have this relationship with one of my artists and they say, hey, I have this idea, can I pitch it to you?
Okay.
Than just getting something randomly. So Kate called me up and she's like, hey, you know, I want you to take a look at the artwork of this pitch. And there wasn't very many sequential pages. It was primarily just character designs and like world building type sheets, things like that, right? The artwork was really good. It was anthropomorphic animals, which there are a lot of anthropomorphic animal comics out there. You know, you can just go back to the 90s when Ninja Turtles was really, really big, and you'll find billions of them. And in fact, that was what created the crash of the independent comics market, was too many of them. I would still consider doing something anthropomorphic if it was really original, right? If I recall correctly, and this was years ago, bear that in mind, I think that they wanted to kind of do a retelling of Norse mythology where animals were the characters instead of humans. I'm not opposed to that. I mean, like, you know, Usagi Yojimbo's been in constant production for how long now? And it's a rabbit samurai, you know? And like I said, the artwork was really good. Here's where the problem came. So we didn't have a problem with the amount they wanted to give us of equity. And the publishing, it was like, you know, I own publishing rights, period. So on and so forth. Because if I'm going to buy equity in a property, I don't want the publishing rights for 2 years. I want them unless I give them up. We were talking back and forth, and they said that they needed an annual salary of $60,000 a year for both the artist and writer until the completion of this project.
What?
Yes.
We need you to pay us to finish our comic.
Right. So I'm trying not to laugh as I get this, but I told Kate, go ahead and ask them how many years they think it's going to take to finish this, right? They state 2 years. Okay. It was planned out as 2 graphic novels. Standard size graphic novels are about 112 pages, just roughly, 108 to 120, somewhere in there. 2 of those, 200 and some odd pages, and they wanted me to pay $120,000.
No, 2 years.
Or $240,000.
Yeah. They want
$240,000 would make them some of the highest paid comic creators there are for 2 trade paperbacks worth of material being produced by a small independent company by 2 totally unknown creators.
It's a bold move.
It is. So I just sent them back a thing asking if they realized how many books I could produce with that much money. They, of course, didn't. They thought 2 trade paperbacks worth, right? But obviously I passed on that one, right?
They sound like people very, very new to the game of what it means.
I would not have thought so by the artwork, but possibly.
Well, they've probably been drawing for a while, and then they finally decided, hey, let's try to get this published.
It's very possible, but the way the guy's sequentials looked, it looked like he was already adept at telling a sequential story, which you normally only get with people who have been very practiced at scripts. So you normally don't get that with novice creators. I had thought about seeing if maybe he just wanted to work on something.
I thought that's where the story might be going when he said that the artwork was very good.
It was like, he thought he needed an annual salary of $60,000 a year. And, if I were Marvel and I could sign people to exclusives, sure. You'd be paying out whatever annually, right? I'm not in a position where I can sign exclusive agreements.
$60,000 for one book?
Right? Do you know how much I could do with that much?
How many people get paid $60,000 for one goddamn book?
I have no idea. I don't know. And you got to think that's writer and artist. And also in comics, statistically, the writer does not make as much as the artist. But that's beyond and besides the point. They wanted $60,000 a year salary. Not page rate, not anything like that.
Fuck that.
Right? So a submission I got earlier this year. So late last year, I was backing some Kickstarter projects, right? I don't always read everything that's on a Kickstarter project. Sometimes, this is going to sound kind of bad in a way, but have you ever done sympathy backing on Kickstarter?
No. I rarely back.
Okay. I
only back when I really, truly like something.
When I've been looking through the comics categories, and I've seen something that's at $25 of a $10,000 goal, and they have 10 days to go, I might throw a $5 pledge in there just because I feel so bad for the person that they can't get their goal up any higher than that, right?
I'd rather donate the $5 to the food bank.
Okay, that's fair. But it's not money that's ever going to leave your pocket, number one.
You are correct.
And number two, I always look at the artwork even if I don't read the whole thing, just to make sure that I'm going to be pleased with the artwork if it does end up funding, right?
That's a big part of your comic.
Yeah, exactly. So at the very least, you're going to have something pretty to look at, right? One of these projects, I looked at the artwork and I didn't realize the first time I looked at it that the artwork was actually from another pre-published comic, and that what he was stating is he imagined the artwork would look something like this.
Oh.
Because I didn't read the whole thing, right? The guy had a $16,000 goal, and he was at $25.
To make something that hadn't even been started.
Correct.
So you couldn't even see what his work looked like.
Right. It was 5-6 days away from ending. So I just threw in a $5 pledge because honestly I felt kind of bad for the guy, right? And about, it was at the beginning of this year, so I'm going to say a couple months after that. I get a message from the guy. Hey, you backed my Kickstarter, which was really nice, but it didn't fund. Okay, that could be quite a few things. There have been a lot of Kickstarters I really, really wanted to fund and didn't, right? I was super excited for Ted Nefe's Kickstarter. Much to my shock, it did not fund. So,
there are some that I want to fund, but then I'm like, fuck you, your lowest submission is $80.
Yeah, there are those. He messaged me and said I backed him. Well, I backed 60 projects or something like that. I don't remember every one of them I backed. And this one was under the Darkslinger profile, so So that's what it was led back to. He's wondering if I would consider publishing this book that failed to fund on Kickstarter. Well, just because it failed to fund on Kickstarter doesn't make it a bad book.
Yeah, plenty of things fail that are still good.
So I messaged him and I was like, I backed a lot of projects, yada yada. I'm sorry, but I have no clue which one you're talking about. You'll have to send me a link. He sends me back a link. I go to the page. The text, had I bothered to read it at first, I could have saved myself a lot of headache because it was incoherent rambling. The story seemed to just be about werewolves. It didn't seem like there was much of an idea there. It was just I want to do a werewolf comic, basically, right?
Yeah,
so I messaged the guy and I said, hey, werewolves are cool, but I don't actually understand at all what the premise of this comic is. You'd have to come a lot more clear, and do you have any sample artwork you could show me? Well, that's when I find out the artwork that was shown was from another comic, and he was stating it will be like this, which I don't even think you should be able to do on Kickstarter and be able to launch it. So long story short...
Seems like it's not copyrighted, but it...
Well, it could be, depending on what method you're using.
Because it seems almost unethical.
It is unethical in a lot of ways. So, in any case, I finally just asked him straight up, look, what is it that you're looking to get from me, right? And he sends me a bullet point. Number one, he lives in this country, but he's not clear of his country yet. And since he's been in America, he's ran up $16,000 in credit card debt. So he needs 16 grand to pay off all the credit card debt he's caused so that he can actually apply for citizenship and not risk being deported when his visa runs out. Number 2, in order to work on this comic, he would need a place to live. And rent in his area is about $1,400 a month. So he would need a monthly salary starting at $1,400. But then he would also need food costs. So we'd have to just make that an even $2,000 a month, right?
Okay.
And then on top of that,
making sense.
He would need money to pay for his visa and to get a car, and things like this. So by the time he had totaled all up, came out to $32,000. And he said, so for a small investment of $32,000, I will fully give you the rights to this comic. Won't be creator owned. At the moment, it's just an idea, but this will allow me time to flesh it out and write it into a story. If at the end of me writing it, you don't like it, you'll get the idea for $32,000 that you can do whatever you want with, and I'll also give you 2 of my other ideas. So at the very least, you'll pay a very small amount of money for 3 ideas. So I just sent him back a message. I was like, look, I don't mean to sound rude, but there is no one at all in the comic industry that's going to do this. 32 grand is not a small sum. We could produce an amazing amount of work with 32 grand. And ideas are worthless. Unless you have carry out behind them, who cares what the idea is?
I'll give you an idea, 2 ideas right now for $20.
Right? Yeah, they'll probably suck because there's no carry out behind your ideas.
Doesn't matter, give me $20.
I would prefer that than $32,000. Plus $2,000 a month. Don't forget that part.
That's ridiculous.
Right?
Why do people think you're going to pay them for something that isn't there?
I don't know. But the third
Unless you're building a fucking house or something like that, or a building, or a car or something, I'm not going to pay you for something that is not there.
Right? So, the third one was a gentleman who submitted to me years ago that was sending me a story that I guess was about, like, Jesus killing people or something. I think I've told you about this one before.
Yeah, I think so.
I did not remotely understand what he's talking about. And when I asked him what this story even was, because I said submissions featuring Darkslinger characters, and this does not feature Darkslinger characters, he stated that the greatest part about it was that it would fit for any character you put Spider-Man or Wolverine into it.
Yeah, okay. I remember that.
So here's the thing about our submissions.
Wolverine Jesus.
If you're a writer I've never worked with, you have to send me a 4-page story featuring a Darkslinger character. Does that mean it'll ever see print? Probably not. I probably am not going to buy it from you. But at least it shows me what type of writer you are, right? Doesn't show me directly because I don't read writer submissions. And the reason I don't read writer submissions is because I'm a writer. And I don't want to be accused of stealing your idea.
That's fair.
Right? So I have someone who reads submissions for me. That used to be Kate. So the whole thing is, I'll look at art, but I won't look at writing, right? When somebody submits art to me, they have to submit art to me featuring one of my characters. The only way around that is if you are a team or you're a person who can do both writing and art, and you submit to me a fully completed story. If you have fully completed story, it doesn't have to have anything to do with anything pre-existing for Darkslinger characters. But any other submission requires Darkslinger characters.
Yeah, because you're looking for someone for your stuff.
Exactly. I don't care about how you draw Spider-Man. I want to know how you draw Lame Mime. That's the only thing that matters to me. How do you draw Lame Mime? How do you draw David? How do you draw Robert? How do you draw these things? If I see that your style has a specific quality that's going to mesh with one of my projects that hasn't been illustrated yet, then I'll toss you a couple of pages of the script. See how you like it. See if you want to do a test page or 2. Go from there, right? But all in all, the submission guidelines are pretty easy to follow, and they're there for a reason. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're wondering the best way to submit to us, don't do it through Facebook. Don't do it through Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram. Don't do it through a blind email. Go to the website, click on the submissions tab, and follow the instructions found there.
We swear we're not dicks. These are just people that are idiots that we're talking about.
Yeah, well, I think that'd be pretty obvious.
Self-explanatory?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably not nice to call people idiots, but it's pretty stupid to think someone's going to be paying you $60,000 plus another 60 for another person on a yearly basis until you somehow finish this project. And if I'm getting paid $60,000 a year to write a story that doesn't exist yet, I'm going to take 12 years to do it.
Dude,
and I'm going to work on it for about an hour every year.
I don't know how old these people were. I don't know if they have
I wouldn't really do that because I never asked somebody for $60,000.
But if they're single and they're making 60 fucking grand a year, you're doing really well for yourself in this time.
Yeah.
You can make half that and be just fine.
Right?
Holy shit. People are lucky to make 60 grand nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah. And despite what people want to think, you can make that in the comic industry.
It's not easy and not many people do it.
No. Well, probably more people than what you realize do it. Because you also have to think about like the royalties that you get for digital sales, for trade paperbacks, when ancillary products are made off of the things that you produced, if the company is above the board enough to pay you royalties on that kind of stuff, you know. I know that Marvel and DC are kind of traditionally dicks about paying creators for anything they had to do with the story. Personally, if like Chronicles Von Helsing was turned into a TV show, Tony's going to get a percentage of that because I'm not a dick. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you know, his covers have meant everything to the story.
You kick a little back to the people that helped to get it there.
Right. But if they created the character at the very least, I know they get a percentage of that. I personally think that if the story is directly based off something that they created, they should get that too. It's like, you know, Chris Claremont and John Byrne created X-Men Days of Future Past. When they straight up make a movie called X-Men Days of Future Past, they should get a small royalty check for the story they created being used. But instead, I think they only get a royalty for, like, you know, Chris Claremont gets a royalty check for Kitty Pryde being used because he created her. If Jubilee is in it, you know, her as well, you know, Jim Lee gets a small check because I know you would say that. But, like, you know, if Gambit appears in something, both of them get a royalty check for that. So I know that they get a small percentage when the specific characters they've invented have been used, but you should get one if your storyline is too. It's like, you didn't create this character, and then somebody went and did something completely different with it, and they didn't use any aspects of this storyline you specifically worked on, then of course you shouldn't get anything from it, you know? I mean, like, if it's Days of Future Past, and you wrote one of the X-Men stories that came out like 2 years ago that was based off Days of Future Past, you're not owed anything, you know, but but the original guys, the first guys who did it, they should be, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about all these comic movies to know which of them are based off specific things. And
right.
But let's say Days of Future Past is partially based off of that run, Days of Future Past.
It's directly based off it. But okay.
But if they
except for the fact that they replaced Shadowcat with Wolverine.
Well, let's say they mix in some other stuff from adjacent storylines.
They did mix in some other stuff. Like Bishop and Blink were in it. They didn't exist during that time period. You know, things like that. So
if you kind of mesh, let's say you mesh like 3 stories together, but you give it one title out of those 3, who would you say gets, like, if they're paying the person that wrote it, who would you say gets the royalty check?
They are directly taking from this storyline and this storyline and this storyline, and it's noticeable that they took from all 3 of those storylines.
But only one of them is getting their name on it.
No, I think they all should.
Do you think they should all get paid?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think it's writer and artist. El Bovine Muerte has now had 2 artists, right? If it were made into a cartoon series, and one episode blended something from issue number 1 that Paul did and mixed in something with the smoking story that Gabriel did, I'm being a dick if I don't pay both of them. They should both get a royalty for that, you know? And royalties don't have to be that much. I mean, like...
No, I don't think they are that
much.
No,
I think they're like 0.1% or some shit like that, you know, or 1% or something like that.
Here's a quarter each time this thing is used.
Yeah, and it can add up a lot, though.
Yeah, a quarter over like 20,000.
Yeah. Or a quarter over 500,000 DVDs or whatever.
Yeah.
You know? So, in any case, that's a conversation for a different day. It's just what I view as ethical as a publisher, personally.
Makes sense. It's smart. It's fair.
Yeah. So, I guess we'll get into that, though, when I actually start selling movie rights. Hopefully I don't become a big old dick, so...
Well, there's a chance.
No, there's not. But
there's a chance.
But anyway, that's it for this week's Darkslinger Mafia podcast. I'm Adam Watson.
Robert Diaz.
Thank you for listening.